I just got back from a trip to the Philippines, and while normally I would really like to just vlog and talk about everything that I did on the trip, like the activities I did, I feel like it's been a while since I've had a very thoughtful and deep conversation where I'm actually able to reflect on my experiences. So I really wanted to take this time to talk about everything that I've learned on this trip to the Philippines and Singapore with my family. So these are all of my thoughts on traveling with family to the Philippines. I think one of the biggest takeaways from this trip is that family trips are a test of patience. From the very beginning of this trip, I knew that I was probably going to have my patience tested. The first time I noticed this actually was when we were at DFW airport and we were about to check in with Alaska to get to Seattle before taking the international flight to the Philippines. No one has their passports out and ready to go. No one just seems prepared or knows what they're doing. No one in my family is like ready to speak up and advocate for ourselves to find someone to help us. I solo travel fairly frequently, or sometimes I'll travel like with a friend or two. So usually the whole process of flying is pretty quick. But with my family, so this family trip was me, my aunt, my uncle, my cousin, who this whole trip was for because she's graduating, my grandpa, and then my dad. In my opinion, it's a little strange to go through the airport with them, especially my aunt, because she is someone who tries to travel internationally at least once a year. So I thought that as someone who travels internationally at least once a year, she would have this down to a science, like to go through the airport, go through customs, get your passport checked, yada, yada, yada. But it was just so inefficient. I'm someone who likes to take charge, and my aunt is also someone who likes to take charge. So I feel like we just had a lot of like competing ideas on what is deemed efficient. So when we got to the Philippines, we knew that a lot of people were going to speak Tagalog or other native dialects. But I think one thing that we didn't account for was how many people actually speak English. I think one thing that I was also a little frustrated by is the difficulties in communicating in English. Like, I know my family doesn't have native English speakers, and it's not that I get embarrassed by their lack of fluency. It's just I'm more so frustrated that others can't understand my family as well as I can. So that means that I will try to step in conversations to see if I can make things easier for both parties to understand. They were expecting us to speak near perfect or fluent English. When two people are speaking broken English to each other, we have broken English Vietnamese style, and then we have broken English Tagalog style. It can be a little difficult to understand each other. And this was a problem that I noticed was happening quite often. So oftentimes I would try to step in and use grammatically correct English, like how you would learn it in schools, to see if maybe they understood classroom English a little better. But of course, that made my family feel frustrated and feel like they couldn't take care of themselves, even though they've traveled internationally so many times now. It's just, I need to understand that I should take a step back and let them do their thing. Like, obviously, I'm not trying to patronize my family. They're completely capable of speaking and communicating on their own. And now I understand that they may feel frustrated if I'm trying to communicate on their behalf. Like, they may feel frustrated when I try to communicate the wrong information, or I might make them feel small or infantile if I try to cover for them. So on my behalf, I just need to understand that my family is perfectly capable of navigating and communicating on their own, and they don't need my help. And that's something that I learned that I need to work on. It's not a them problem. It's definitely a me issue. Speaking of cultural differences, is my family the only family out there that wants to always try Vietnamese food in other countries? My family is always looking for Vietnamese food when we go travel. I always thought traveling was to try new experiences and to try new foods, try new cultures, but I found that every single place we go to, every vacation we go, every city we explore, my family is always looking for Vietnamese food. Like, yes, we did try Filipino culture and we did try Filipino food, but my family was just trying so hard to find Vietnamese food while we were in the Philippines. Like, I don't know if it's maybe just because Vietnamese food is familiar to them and they want to go try Vietnamese food, kind of in a similar vein where sometimes Americans will miss like burgers and french fries and stuff, and so they will like go out of their way to get American food while they're visiting another country. It's like maybe that's like the same thought process with Vietnamese food. It is difficult to find Viet people and Viet food while in the Philippines. But while we were in Puerto Princesa, I actually found out that one of the reasons why we wanted to go to Puerto Princesa was so we could visit some historical sites where Vietnamese people found refuge in the Philippines. But like everywhere we went for Vietnamese food in the Philippines, honestly was not it. You know, cháo lòng. So cháo lòng in Vietnamese culture is kind of like congee. It is kind of like a rice porridge dish. Generally, cháo lòng is like congee. But when we went to go get Vietnamese food, cháo lòng was not cháo lòng. Cháo lòng was more like pho, which is like a beef broth with vermicelli noodles. But cháo lòng in the Philippines was more like the noodles were kind of like a thick udon-y consistency, or maybe it was more like bánh canh type of like noodle, kind of a thicker noodle. And then the broth itself was more like a chicken noodle soup. My cousin said that cháo lòng in Puerto Princesa was the uncanny valley of Vietnamese food, and I have not stopped thinking about that since because that's actually very accurate. There was one place in Puerto Princesa that had authentic Viet food, and that was because the owner is half Filipino and half Viet, and he travels between like Canada, United States, Vietnam, and then the Philippines. He knew what was up. Shout out to this man, Remy. I think the spot is called Renee's Kitchen, and we were actually super lucky to have run into him because his restaurant was actually right next door to a World War II historical museum. Within that museum, there was a section that was specifically to commemorate and memorialize the Vietnamese refugees that took refuge in Puerto Princesa and the Philippines. And as someone who does so much research on my family's history, and I've done short films and interviews with my family and about my family, it was so mind-boggling and eye-opening to me to be able to visit a museum and see the memories and the history of when refugees from the Vietnam War found refuge in the Philippines. It was so nice to see Vietnamese history being recognized in Puerto Princesa. The fact that the museum acknowledged that there were over 10,000 Vietnamese people that took refuge in Puerto Princesa, like I don't know how to explain the feeling of walking in and seeing all the pictures and the paragraphs describing how life was in those refugee camps. It was just so sobering to also see my family enter that room. Immediately, I could see the memory in my family's eyes. I could see my uncle and my dad face their past. It was actually my uncle who took refuge in the Philippines, whereas my dad found refuge in Malaysia, Indonesia, and then Singapore. Both of the brothers traveled separately to the United States. My family didn't necessarily see it as trauma per se, but more so something that they just had to endure and experience to seek the opportunities that they wanted to achieve. It was still a revisit of their history and gratefulness towards the Filipino people. And while my family was taking everything in, it reminded me to take a step back and let them live their memories, because I'm sure they've had so many stories that they haven't even had a chance to tell me yet. I want to say that I am pretty knowledgeable and I know more about my dad's trip from Vietnam to the United States more than how a lot of other people would with their family history. But something about this part of the trip just hit me very deeply. I know that I may not be able to get all of the stories from my family. It was very sobering to be in that space. Like I don't even know how to describe it. After that encounter, I did realize that I wanted to make more documentaries and narrate experiences of others. I think storytelling is something that I'm good at, and I'm able to convey the emotions and the feelings of others onto a screen. I think this may be a project for the future. Speaking of narration and documentaries, even though I'm pretty good at taking other people's stories and putting it on the screen, it's actually really difficult for me to talk about my own experiences and my own stories. And so that's why vlogging is kind of difficult for me. Even just sitting here and talking directly to the camera is something that I struggle with. You can see me literally look anywhere but the camera. I feel like I just do that so often normally, like when I'm talking to everyday people. is I just like always look anywhere. Even though storytelling and narrative documentaries and making films comes naturally, vlogging does not. Vlogging does not come naturally to me. It's hard to talk about myself, and it's hard to talk about my feelings and my emotions. I'm trying. Even when I was on this trip, I was trying to vlog. But another test of patience was figuring out how to vlog in front of my family or nearby my family, while also facing their humiliation and mockery. Because when I was trying to vlog parts of my trip, sometimes they would whip out their phone and try to film me, and they would be like, "Oh my god, wow, Brianna is a filmmaker, look at her, she is a director." And it's literally just me like vlogging to the camera. They would say stuff like that when I was like pulling out my equipment to film. Like, I understand that they're trying to support me, but the over supportiveness actually makes me shy away from wanting to vlog, because not only are they very loud, but I feel like I'm being smothered. If you know me, I am someone who is very independent and I need space in order to grow. And kind of speaking on independence, I realized that I am way more independent than specifically my cousin's family. It was this trip specifically where I understood how different I was raised from my cousin. For context, I knew that my cousin and I were very different. Like, look at me, I'm literally a filmmaker. I'm a filmmaker. I'm in the creative space. And my cousin, this was her graduation trip for graduating from medical school. Imagine you have two cousins that were basically born around the same time and were both raised together, and one becomes a filmmaker and the other becomes a doctor. I grew up in a here's $20, go explore, and then meet me back here at 3 p.m. type of family. I think that overall has made me crave structure from being too independent, and it has given me trouble making decisions for myself sometimes. And with that also has made me become very cautious of spending, very aware of time, and just like someone who is just very self-reliant as a person. On the other hand, my cousin is someone who grew up in a let's go together type of family. So she has a lot more direct support and a strong sense of trust in her family. They are able to give her structure and help guide her. Neither way of growing up is necessarily wrong. It's just very interesting to see the differences between myself and my cousin whenever we're interacting with our family. It's very interesting to see that even though we came from basically the same family and the same background, we were raised so differently and our paths to adulthood are just so different. But overall, I feel like being on this trip has actually reminded me of a very wonderful quote, and that is, "It's your parents' first time living too." And I think that's very true, because I try to give myself a lot of grace for messing up or acting a certain way, because I tell myself it's my first time being an adult. And sometimes I forget that it's the same with my parents too. It's their first time raising an independent filmmaking 24-year-old. It's their first time being parents to someone who's my age and acts the way that I do. I'm very thankful that I've had the privilege to explore a whole different country and experience a new culture that I've never really had a chance to interact with before. And I'm very grateful that I'm reminded to treat my family with a lot of kindness and patience. I'm someone who very dearly loves my family, even though sometimes we may not get along. As I grow up, I definitely realize that I want to be closer with my family, and every single day we get older, and every single day time is running out for us to spend time with our families. And I understand that not everyone has the same privilege and opportunity as I do, where I'm able to connect with my family, because not every family is on good terms. It just makes me feel very grateful that I do have a family that I can rely on and that I am close with, and that I'm just so grateful that I am able to communicate with them, share stories with them, and explore with them.